Welcome back, everybody, to the Charles Billingsley podcast. I'm Charles Billingsley.
What's in your coffee cup? I don't know why you're talking
just
so strange.
talking like the penguins on Madagascar.
Okay. I thought you were doing a play-by-play.
No, I'm just no. Well, it does sound kind of Well, we did interview James Brown. But he's not a play-by-play guy.
No,
he was in hockey.
Which is amazing
So
because
weird.
hockey goes so fast.
Yeah.
They have the shortest plays, like the shortest thing, and the longest
and
names.
all the guys are named, and Johan Shavinsky passes it to,
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I don't know how these guys get all these words out. But golf is slower. I could be a golfer now.
Yes, you could. You really could. Because you know it.
I know the game. I can talk quietly.
And he watches it nonstop.
And Firestone has a putt, 20 feet. Looks like it's going to break right to left, about one cup out. Downhill. It's going to be a fast one.
Have you guys seen where they?
We're losing audience by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, so I brought up
But
golf.
last thing.
Okay, all right. Go.
Okay. Have you seen where they switched the announcers of swimming and golf?
Oh, yes, it's fantastic.
Just look that up.
Yeah, look it up on
It'll-
YouTube, right?
Yeah.
By the way, this is Adam Lancaster.
Oh yeah, that's Adam here.
Oh, Adam Lancaster's with us again today. But I brought up golf because of our guest last week, Todd Firestone. Amazing story.
Yes.
Amazing guy. And just world class and wonderful golfer, but really a great coach, but mostly just a world class host. He knows how to just host people.
No matter what you're doing, hospitality is important.
Absolutely.
Extremely important. He knows what he is doing. By the way, I'm Brandon Pickett. So glad that you are with us on the Charles Billingsley podcast, and so glad Charles is in town.
Well, and yes, it's been a crazy couple of weeks, but more to come. We got World Women of Joy. We just did a World Help event. Women of Joy is coming up. And speaking of going out of town, I have an announcement.
Here it is.
We
Everybody ready?
are going to Israel,
Yes.
January 8th through the 18th. The information is now
2024,
online.
I assume.
You can
Yes.
Oh yes,
2024.
2024.
Just making sure.
Yes.
Just-
but the information's online. You can go to the website, go to podcast information.
show notes
Show
will have
notes,
it
is
there.
that-
Yeah,
yes, that's what you're looking for,
We'll
okay.
have it everywhere. A link to where you can actually start signing up. Join us in Israel, January 8th through 18th, and we are working very aggressively with the Jerusalem Symphony to finish the trip with a concert with the Jerusalem Symphony. But we're going to visit all the sites that everybody knows about, do some concerts. I'll also do some teaching. We're going to have a great time. And we've only got space for about 100 people. So
That's
now
huge
it's time to
news,
start
though.
signing up.
And a lot of times people need to know, don't wait to sign up. Go on and sign up now.
That's
So
right.
that way you reserve your space. And by the way, this is, if you know, this is not going to be done, how can I say this? You're going to be in some great places.
No.
Where
This
you're,
is not a 3-star.
Yeah, that's
trip.
what I was gonna say.
This is a 5-star trip.
oh,
We're going
okay.
big. We're going big.
3
time.
stars sometimes I'm like happy about.
Oh well, yes, but this is really nice. I mean, the
Okay.
hotels we're staying at, the restaurant, everything is first class, and so it's a little more expensive, but it's really going to be worth it. It's going to be an awesome
As Higgins
trip.
would say, it's going to be swanky.
It's going to be pretty swanky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So January 8th through 18th, make sure and check all of our sites and everything to
We'll have it
more
all up on the
information that.
website as soon as possible. And we're excited about today's guest, Charles.
Yes, tell us all about it, Brandon. This is going to be a pretty cool story.
We're going to go to a break in just a minute, but first I want to tell you, Fred and Casey Weymouth, they have an amazing story of really being at one time top of the heap and then at the bottom, and then God brought them back, and they have an incredible ministry called The Fix, which you'll understand what The Fix is all about right after this break.
Welcome back to the Charles Billingsley podcast. We are excited. We have fantastic friends and guests with us here today. Brandon, tell us
Yes.
about our guests.
Fred and Casey Weymouth from Richmond, Virginia are with us. Hey, guys, good that you are with us. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so they have an amazing story. Right now they are working with a ministry, actually started this ministry called The Fix. And if you understand about addiction, addicts are always looking for the next fix. And so that's kind of their background. But hey, let's go back in the Wayback Machine here and kind of take us back to where it all started. Fred and Casey, you guys can tell us, actually you choose who starts. I don't really care because both stories are amazing. Yeah.
I'd say that, Basically, I struggled with addiction of some sort my entire life. There was some abuse that went on in my family. I came from a family that, we're from Georgia. So we grew up in the Bible Belt. So everybody knew who Jesus was, but we didn't exactly follow him, so to speak. My parents were products of the 70s. There was a lot of partying going on. And I kind of fell right into that. And as I kind of grew up in my adolescent years, I dabbled. My first addiction, I'd say, was food. And then as I got to be about 13 or 14, I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, and I struggled with an eating disorder most of that time. And then I just spent so many years looking for something in the world to fill me. And it became men. And then I started dabbling with drugs and alcohol. And by the time I was 18 years old, I was a full-blown addict. I was a full-blown alcoholic. Now, I wouldn't have told you that at the time, but I knew that there was something wrong, and I started trying to fix it. And so I decided when I graduated high school that I would go to the military. I always made good grades, and I was good in school, but I knew that if I went to college, it was not going to go well. And so I went to the military to get some, just get myself in line. And I did very well in the military, but I learned how to drink in a way that was functional in the military. And I continued to try to fix me in some type of way. And I still had problems with my drinking. And I got married in the military, and then I got out. During this time, my father died of a drug overdose when I was 20 years old. And, you'd have thought that that would be the thing that would turn me around. But, you never think it's going to happen to you. You never think that you're going to be as bad as you see other people get. And so I continued to dabble. And then, I went to college. I did very well in college. I was functional for a very long time until I wasn't anymore. And I would say my son, who is now 22 years old, was diagnosed with autism when he was about 3. And I struggled really, really hard to deal with that. I tried to fix him. And I mourned, the child that I thought that I wanted per se. And I tried to fix him and make him what society, would say is normal. And then I got to a point where I realized I couldn't fix him and I couldn't fix me. And I just kind of washed my hands, and I just went full on in my addiction. I struggled for several years. I ended up losing my marriage, my house, my car, my custody of my son for a while. And I was just in full active addiction. And I knew who God was, but I wasn't interested in any of that. And it got to a point.
So, hey, Kay, I want to just stop you. I'm sorry, but it seems like every time you were trying to fix either your son or a situation or yourself, it got worse.
Yes. I ended up finding myself in a place where I was even more broken than to begin with. And I just got to this point of complete brokenness. I lost everything. All the things that I held dear to me, I lost it. And the funny thing is, my mom had come to know the Lord when I was about 16 years old, and she was constantly sharing the gospel with me, sending me scriptures, sending me worship songs, and I'd be in the middle of some pretty rough stuff, and I'd just get something from my mom. So she was constantly planting seeds in me. And during this time, like I was a bank examiner for the Federal Reserve Bank. I worked for the Virginia State Corporation Commission.
Wow, really?
I was doing.
How
That's amazing. So you're able to do that kind of a job while being addicted to all this stuff?
Yeah, until I couldn't anymore. I was functional for such a time, and then it got to a point where I was completely enslaved to it, and it wasn't like I could go and dabble here and dabble there and just leave it alone for a couple of days. It got to a point where every day I couldn't get out of the bed unless I had drugs or I had something. I could not function without it. And that's when I started losing things. I lost my job. I got fired, and then, I lost my house, and I lost my car, and I lost everything. And the only job that I could find and hold down was a job bartending. And so, and that was because I could I could get high, and I could drink, and I could, be somewhat functional in that type of environment. And one night at about 2 a.m., I had lost everything, and I had been sleeping in my car because I had, for about a month, because I'd lost my house. And, I was trying to get back on my feet, and I had enough money in my pocket that night to get a hotel room because my car had broken down, or to get high. And I chose to get high. And then, I had this moment of clarity, like, how did I get here? How have I gotten to this point, and all the things that I've done in my life? And I cried out to God, who I did not really know or understand. And there was some yelling and some screaming and some anger and all kinds of stuff. But that night at 2 a.m., outside of a bar in Williamsburg, Virginia, the Lord met me there. And I knew it wasn't like, oh, abracadabra, I'm fixed, everything's great. I knew that I couldn't continue to live the life that I had been living. I had to change some things. So I quit that job. I called my mama, who was the only person that I knew that knew the Lord. And I said, hey, she lived in Georgia still. I was in Virginia. And I said, I'm getting on a Greyhound bus and I'm coming there, and what is really humbling is, that same bedroom that I grew up in, and I was trying to get out of my whole life. And, here I am at 35 years old, and I'm back right where I started. But it was in that humility, God met me there, and God started changing me. And these women, then my mom's circle of friends at this teeny little church in Georgia just surrounded me, and they had been praying for me for 20 years in the midst of my addiction. And they just discipled me and walked with me in such a way that was so beautiful. Wow. And they knew nothing, like, they didn't know about drug addiction, but they knew Jesus. They knew the fix, which is Jesus, right? And so, and so I just had this beautiful group of women come alongside me and disciple me in the Lord. So,
wow. That's an amazing story, Casey. And I mean, it's hard even to know what to say after that, except to say that during this is the exact time you're going through that, Fred, you're going through something at the same time that's not too unsimilar than that.
Yeah, you'll probably hear some of the same things. I was born and raised in the city of Richmond, to a very prominent family there in the city. We were known, my family was known, pretty popular in the insurance industry. My grandfather started an insurance company in 1949. My father inherited that, and I was groomed to take it over. And when I approached high school, I started to dabble with alcohol and other substances. By the 10th grade, I was introduced to heroin. And by my senior year, I graduated high school with a heroin addiction. I went to work for my father in the insurance business. At 18, I was, I think, the youngest licensed insurance agent in the state at the time. But I had this secret, and I was hiding it, and I was very good at hiding it. I was using heroin every day. But also, parallel to that, I was very successful in the insurance field. I was very outgoing, sold a lot of insurance. I was a producer, and at 19 or 20 years old, I was probably bringing home $1,200 to $1,500 a week in commission. And I was able to support my life and my habit at the same time with that type of money. But the effects started to affect my work ethic. I wasn't showing up at work on time. I was missing days. My dad shows up at my apartment and sits down and says, "Hey, I know you're struggling with a drug problem." And I was honest about it with him. And I went to my first rehab at 20. 30 days, Dad picks me up at the front of the facility that I was in and said, "Hey, what do you think about the military?" And if you knew my dad was very patriarchal. That wasn't a question; it was a command. So, what's that?
What do you think about this, son?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we went straight from that door to the recruiter's office. I signed up for the United States Coast Guard. I went in and served our country. I did very well, like my wife talked about in that structure. I was in search and rescue. I was a coxswain and a bosun mate. And, you know, we went on a lot of rescue calls. We pulled a lot of people out of the water. But in the process of that, I didn't do heroin anymore, but I started to drink. There was 50-cent drafts on base. So you could drink. And as long as I could get up the next day and perform my duties, they didn't say anything about the drinking. So the next 12 years, I drank like a fish.
Wow. Coast Guard
Yeah.
for 12 years.
Yes.
That was your full-time occupation?
Yes. I did 4 years active. I did 4 years reserve, and I did 4 years inactive. So the inactive is like whenever they needed you.
Okay.
So did you go back to the insurance business after you got out, or after you were
Yeah.
inactive?
Yeah. So I actually went to back to work for my dad, kind of part-time as a reservist. And in inactive, I was working for him full-time. But I got out, I got my honorable discharge. And a week after getting that honorable discharge, I started using the heroin again.
You're right back where you were. And
Didn't miss a beat.
but then kind of tragedy struck your family around that time, didn't it?
Yeah. So, what happened was, you know, I was working for my father. He got diagnosed with cancer, very young, passed away, and I kind of took the reins of the family business. At that time, my father passing away, there were 41 employees in the business that we were involved in. And I found myself in a place that I wasn't mature enough to handle yet, really.
Yeah. Now you're running the business and in charge of 41 employees, and yet there's this private addiction going on.
Yes. And then in that, in the pressure of that, and the time, I didn't have the time to really grieve my father's death. Looking back, I just put my nose down and went to work. And the drug addiction started to completely spiral out of control. And it spiraled to a point where it was affecting the business. And some people stepped in, took the business from me. And eventually I sold it. I sold the business, and I took the money that I got and continued to spiral into this dark place of addiction with heroin.
Tell me,
you
had shared about the money that you got from the sale. You were actually kind of be specific about that, because that was amazing.
So I went to BB&T on Broad Street and cashed this check. It was a substantial amount of money. And I put it in shoe boxes in the top of my closet.
Like just green hard cash.
Yes. And I all I can tell you is I lived like a rock star for at least 2 years. No job, no income. And I slowly spent every penny of that money on drugs and the lifestyle.
So you'd go to the closet, pick up a wad of cash of what, $5,000, $10,000, something like that?
20,000 at a clip, 50,000 one time, and just said, I'm gonna blow this money, and then I'll get myself straight.
Wow.
And then I kept doing that over and over again until I looked in the box and there wasn't much left.
Then what do you do at that point?
At that point, after that money ran out, I lost the house that I was living in, vehicles, complete relapse mode, and really ended up in the street.
Homeless?
Yeah.
You're living in the streets of downtown Richmond.
Yeah, Shockoe Bottom specifically. So I would stay in Shockoe Bottom and along Commerce Avenue corridor. And I would tell you through this process, I probably tried at least 12 rehabilitation programs to try to stop. I was in this place where I wanted to stop using heroin, but couldn't. So I was miserable using it, but I was miserable without it. So it was like being torn in two.
And that's where every addict ends up, isn't it?
Yeah.
In that same spot.
In that same spot.
So what are you doing homeless here? You're living in the streets.
Yeah.
What's in your mind? What are you thinking at that point?
Well, I'm thinking, it's always rolling around in the back of your mind. Like you're looking at, your life before all this. I was successful. My family was successful. I've lost everything. I've lost the family business. My ex-wife now and my kids are gone. I've burnt every bridge. I was at this place, and then, to support my habit, I started to break the law. I started to compromise my morals. I was robbing and pillaging. I was getting locked up in and out of jails, in and out of the city jail. You're doing whatever you had to do really to support that thing. So
you can't get much more down to the bottom of the pit than where you were.
Yeah, it was a rough place. I can remember, I would tell you that I laid down behind a Valero, and y'all got to understand, I was not built to be homeless. It's not something that I was good at. So it was
Built to be
I like that.
Yeah, that's a good realization.
I mean, really, and I suffered through that, and I laid down in the Valero behind a Valero gas station in the woods. That's where I was sleeping at the time, and it was July, and I couldn't get the mosquitoes to stop eating on me. So I was down in a sleeping bag laid on cardboard boxes, and this particular night, man, they were eating me alive, and I remember that night I couldn't sleep because of them things, and I was wrestling with God. And I didn't grow up in church, guys. My family didn't frequent church. We may have gone to church on an Easter every 5 years or something. But like Casey said, I cried out to God that night because I was done. I was done with life. I had no fight left in me, and I asked the Lord to let me die because I was tired of living. I tried everything you could. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this. I had tried everything humanly possible to stop using heroin. I really had. I felt defeated. I felt lost. I felt broken. I'd been to psychologists, psychiatry, program after program, hospitals, and I'd stay clean a while. I tried 12-step fellowships. You name it. If you told me to do it, I'd try it.
When you guys both of you, when you're talking about your story, there's this spiral downward that you both talk about. When you're in that, are you justifying everything that's going on? Are you placing yourself in a victim state, or are you self-aware where you're going, man, I'm really messing things up? What's a little bit of the brain function in that state?
I would tell you, like, because of the secular programs that I went through, I had this mindset of I had a disease, and of course that carried into I'm a victim. Mm-hmm. And that's hard. That's hard to shake that once it's planted there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, it was always, you're self-deceiving. So you're always like, I'm the victim. It's everybody else's fault. I too had trauma as a child with sexual abuse. It was all because of that and this, mm-hmm. and you play that card as hard as you can play it while you're in it.
And what I would say is that there's absolutely that justification and that rationalization, and it's all these things. I'm this way because of all these things. But the turning point is when you say, hold up, those things happen, but I'm making choices now. So
Right.
the turning point is when you realize, like, I don't want to do this anymore, but now I'm in bondage to the sin.
Yes.
And then that's the turning point. That's when true change can happen, is when you start to say, now I'm going to hold myself accountable for the decisions I'm making. That's when there was a life change.
What I read this from an author, we have to get to the point to where we all realize we are ridiculously in charge of our own lives and our own decisions.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break because we are at a good place in this story where both of you are at the absolute bottom of the barrel. We're going to come back, though, and find out how you went from the bottom back to the top. Be right back.
Welcome back to the Charles Billingsley podcast, and what an amazing story! And we love stories like this, but I don't love this part of the story, but this is part of the story. You can't, you can't separate one part out from the other. It's an entire story. And so here we are with Fred and Casey Weymouth. Guys, thank you so much again for joining us. And Charles, you said when we left him at the break, it was at the bottom.
Yeah, the very bottom of the pit, and it's amazing how many people, millions upon millions, have to get to the bottom of the pit before we finally come to the end of ourselves, But that's where you find that you're just right at the beginning of who God is. So tell us what happened.
Yeah. Casey,
you want to start with your side?
Well, it's a little complicated because what you have to know is, in the midst of our addiction, Fred and I actually met. So, we met in 2008.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions. How did y'all come together?
Well, so we had this period, both of us had a small period. Like he said, he had tried the 12 steps. He had tried, psychology, psychiatry, maintenance medications. And we were both in the midst of trying all those things. And I had gone to a rehab in 2008, and I had a little bit of sobriety, and so did he. And that's when we met. We had not hit the bottom of the barrel yet, though. We had about a year together of sobriety, and it was great. It was fantastic. He and I had a great relationship. And then one of us relapsed, and then the other relapsed. And it was probably the most toxic relationship of my life. And that happened for about 7 years of just, we were on heroin together. We were, you name it, we were doing it. We were fighting, we were fussing. It was just, all I can say, it was toxic. It was terrible. And so when I left to go to Georgia, one of the reasons was to get away from him. We were not good for each other in our addiction. And so little did I know, though, when I was in Georgia and the Lord was just discipling me, and just the sweet time of getting to know God and getting to know me, what I didn't know was that God was also doing something in Fred. God was also working on him. And so, when I'm going to let him tell his story, but he called me one day, or he called my mom and said, hey, I've come to know the Lord, and I just really want to know how Casey's doing. And I'm like, he's lying. He didn't come to know the Lord. He's just trying to get me back. And I'm not for that. I am really trying. I've got a new life. I'm not going
falling
back.
for that.
We're not doing this.
The old I met God speech. Here we go.
Yeah. He's tried everything else.
Yes. So, he kept calling. He kept calling my mom, and I kept saying, no, I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to talk to him. And then the Lord started really working on me and my heart. And it was like, man, wow, you have little faith. If I can change you, I can change him. He's not so far gone that I can't also do something in him. And so I took his call, and it's crazy that the Lord not only redeemed us separately, but has also redeemed and reconciled us as a couple. And it's like it's a whole nother relationship. It's just not the same. We're new creations, but our relationship is a new creation as well.
So Fred, I just want to say, let's just pause here, because Fred, when we left you, you were on cardboard getting eaten up by mosquitoes. So how do you get from that to you're calling Casey hoping you get back?
Yeah.
So I cried out that night. I woke up the next day. I hitchhiked or caught a ride to our rescue mission in downtown Richmond. Started to sober up. And in the midst of that, I had some consequences of my past catch up with me while I was there. Instead of running like I usually did, I turned and I faced them. I went to jail. It was June 1st of 2013. I went into a regional jail here in the Richmond area. But after some time, maybe a couple months, I heard about a church service that they were doing every other Thursday. And I went, and I went not to hear the gospel. I went to hear and see other people in the jail that I normally didn't mingle with. So that was a way to pass information and notes and things to other inmates. So that's really the reason I went. And there's a guy there in the front of us who had this long white beard. He looked crazy, and just his appearance alone got my attention. So I'm listening to him. He's preaching out of Acts 2. I'll never forget this day. But I tell you what really got me, and I tell this story because it was profound to me at the time. This guard walked over to the podium and said, "Hey, man, you're run out of time. You got to stop." And he looked over at him and said, "The Lord's not done yet." I'll never forget this. So wow. The guard looked at him funny and then walked back over to the wall and stood there and let him finish.
Wow.
Which in my place there, that was just unheard of for you to do that.
Tell a guard what he's going to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went back to my cell. I got a hold of a Bible. And I didn't put it down the rest of the time I was there.
Wow.
Getting out, I got out on September 1st the following year. And on September 7th, I walked into a church and gave my life publicly to Jesus. Interesting to note that church was across the street from the Valero I had been living in.
Good gracious.
It happened to be the pastor there, I found out later, happened to be the brother of the guy that was preaching the gospel in the jail.
Wow. Wow.
So it just funny how God worked all these things out. And I was discipled through the local church there. The men in the church were the ones that held me accountable. It was a rough first year. But they didn't give up on me. My pastor was giving me drug tests, holding awesome. Me accountable.
So they're right in there with you.
Yeah, they were going to court with me.
Wow.
And so in the process awesome. Of that, I wanted to check on Casey to see how she was doing. I did miss her. I'll be honest. So I called her and. I wanted to honor the Lord. I wanted to do things right. So, once we got talking, and she says that on her end, but I'm saying it on my end. I wanted to make sure she was following the Lord, because I knew great. How toxic it was. There are two sides to every story, guys.
Yeah.
And then there's the truth.
And then there's the truth. Yeah, that's right. That's good.
So I asked her over the phone if she would marry me.
Wow.
And I think she was a little overwhelmed by that question, and then she called me a few days later and said yes. So here wow. we sit.
Wow. Unbelievable. So you get together, and miraculously, God pulls you both in different ways out of the pit, and then puts you together. Yeah. And now you're working together to do ministry, aren't you?
Yeah, tell us about this, because here, just to put it succinctly, Adam, you got two addicts who are now always looking for. They were always looking for the fix. They found the fix in Jesus. Now they call their ministry the Fix.
The Fix. Pretty cool.
I love it.
So tell us about how that started.
So I would say that, when we started back, fostering our relationship, and we decided, we're going to do this thing God's way, we made a commitment. I mean, of course, we had individually made this commitment to follow Jesus, but we made a commitment as a couple that we were going to allow our marriage, we were going to allow everything about our lives to reflect Christ. We were going to chase Jesus the way we had chased the dope dealer.
Yeah.
We were going to run after Christ the way we had run the streets.
Wow.
We were going to work just as hard because we didn't go, we always took care of us, right?
Yeah.
In the midst of our addiction. We were going to make sure that we had that type of devotion and we ran that hard for Christ. And so we started going back to the places where Fred had been homeless, in downtown Richmond. And we had enough money in our pockets to get, because we had both been homeless, so we didn't have anything. We were starting completely over. So on a Saturday, we'd have enough money in our pockets to get $20 worth of sausage, egg, and cheese biscuits. And we would walk around downtown Richmond, give out biscuits and say, how can I pray for you? Do you have a need that we can meet? And then we would go back to our local church and we'd say, hey, we met this guy and he needs a sleeping bag. Is there anybody that can meet this need?
Wow.
And somebody would meet the need. And then the following week we would meet those needs. We would continue to pray for those people. And we were just forming relationships very organically. Right. And then, but the longer we did that, we did this for 3 months, we did this for 6 months, and we realized these same guys, they're just as drunk as they were when we started. They're just as high as they were when we started. Right. And, we both kind of came to this realization that it was not sausage, egg, and cheese biscuits or coats or sleeping bags that saved us. It was Christ. Yeah. And faith come by hearing and hearing by the word of God. Yeah. And I think this is about the time that Fred started to be feeling called to actually pastor and preach. And someone really pushed him to start preaching the gospel in downtown Richmond. Yeah. And I think you should pick up now.
That was really good. Thank you, Casey. What happened then, Fred?
I'm trying not to cry, so give me a second. Like Casey said, I when I came to the Lord, I lived with an elder in the church behind his house in a trailer, and I worked for him for free because he gave me a place to stay, and he fed me. But I got offered a job at the paper mill there in Richmond. And I went from making $0 to $23 an hour. And it was a miracle of God to me at the time.
Yeah.
I hadn't worked a steady job since probably 2009.
Something.
And so that was a huge deal for me. So after Casey and I paid all our bills, I had like $3,000 in our checking account. And I was just like, I was flabbergasted.
Yeah.
Like, how in the world, God, do you want me to use this money? So that's kind of how the McDonald's bacon, egg, and cheese ministry started. But this guy came from California. He got plugged into the church I was at. He's an older gentleman who went downtown with me and saw what the Lord was doing amongst those homeless people. And he urged me to preach the gospel to them and teach them. And I was like, that's why you're here. That's not what I'm called to do. But he said, that is what you're called to do. So forcefully, he pushed me out in front of those homeless people, and I started preaching to them. People started to respond to the gospel. People were getting saved and baptized in downtown Richmond. We would take a horse trough down there, and the fire department would come by and fill it for me. It was just a beautiful time in ministry.
That's incredible.
It was amazing. And actually, we still do this ministry, and we baptized 4 homeless people that received Christ last night.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. Okay.
So anyway, I started preaching. So it went from like 8 or 9 homeless people in Farmers Market on Main Street to, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this, it was within a couple of months, there was 150 to 200 people showing up every Sunday night.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Where was it? Where were you doing this?
in the farmers market on Main Street in Richmond.
And they were letting you do this. The city was allowing you to do this.
Okay, so we're getting there.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So I think in that the businesses down there got kind of upset after a couple months of 100 homeless people showing up and, just not here. Y'all love what you do, but just not here. Wow. We started to move from parking lot to parking lot in downtown Richmond until we finally got a parking lot that we rented from the city. So we weren't able to get kicked out, but it was kind of mobile for a couple years from parking lot to parking lot. So it was pretty neat.
So you essentially have this parking lot church.
Yes.
And probably had some regulars every Sunday night that you're.
Yes.
And so essentially you planted a church in Richmond in a parking lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how long did that go on until, did it just stop one day or are you still doing it?
Yeah, we're still doing it. We started that in 2016.
Wow.
We met every Tuesday and Sunday. We have for years.
Wow.
But see, out of that, what happened was we had a guy named Preston Fox who walked up in the middle of a sermon that I was preaching and handed me a whole bag of heroin and his needles and said, "I want this Jesus you keep telling us about." And for the next weeks, I tried hard to get him into a place and nobody would take him for various reasons. Whether it was money issue or he didn't have an ID, but he sincerely wanted to get clean and follow Jesus, and I could not get him anywhere. Wow. And it broke my heart. And Casey and I at that moment started to pray for God to give us a place where these men could come and not have a bunch of red tape.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where this fix ministry was birthed in that moment for my wife and I. So.
And explain to us what the fix is now. What does that entail?
So we have kind of a conglomerate of ministries. We have a church. We actually have two churches, like Mr. Billingsley was talking about. We have the church in downtown. I couldn't remember your first name.
No, I love it. I love it. I kind of liked that. I think maybe Brandon and Adam should call me Mr. Billingsley.
He really wants us to call him Sir Charles, but we don't do that.
I wanted Sir Charles, but Mr. Billingsley's fine. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's Charles. We have now our downtown ministry, our homeless church, so to speak. We meet at 22 East Lee Street in downtown Richmond. Okay. So we have a building downtown now.
Oh, great.
And we meet every Sunday night.
And you call it the Fix?
Well, it's called the Fix Lighthouse Ministry, which is our outreach. It's our outreach church.
Okay.
And then out of this desire to help people come off the street. So if they come and they respond to the gospel and they want to change their lives, we have a men's residential facility that's 12 to 18 months. We have a women's residential facility that's 12 to 18 months. The men's house has 33 beds. The women's house has 8. We also have a thrift store and a furniture store that helps fund those ministries so that we can take anybody. They don't need to pay anything. They don't have to, this ministry is self-sufficient. We also take donations from the local churches. We get on their mission boards. That's how we're able to fund this thing. And now we're getting ready to plant a church in Tappahannock. Well, actually, we've already planted the church in Tappahannock.
Tappahannock, is that West Virginia?
No, Tappahannock is actually in Virginia, east of Richmond.
Okay.
Right near the Rappahannock River.
And you're about to plant a church in West Virginia also?
Well, this is our maybe 2 to 5 year plan.
Okay.
And it's not just a church. We would like to plant an entire fixed ministry in West Virginia.
Okay.
Because we're looking for places who have severe drug problems so that we can plant what we're doing here other places.
Okay.
Can you there's an amazing story that I just heard about with this that tell us about the building that you just received.
What?
In Tappahannock.
We have the men's and women's facilities, and we were meeting at a local church that was letting us use their building because we do our services on Saturday night. So a couple showed up, started to attend regularly, and they approached Casey and I about a building that they had in Tappahannock. We looked at the building. I felt like the building was too much. It's about a 24,000 square foot facility. But through a whole process, the couple decided to donate the building to the church.
Wow.
So now we have this beautiful building in Tappahannock that we are calling the Fixed Chapel and Mission Center. So we want to be able to reach the people around us and have a place for these people that we minister to come and be poured into and discipled. So
that's awesome, man. I can't. I'm blown away with your story, but we have to close this down pretty quickly. But before we do, I just want to ask you something. You talked about functioning alcoholics, which basically means you're addicted to it, but you're still able to get through your day and hide it somehow, or which I think there's a lot of people who are involved in that. So here's what I want to ask you in our closing minutes here. I just feel like there's people listening to this podcast who are that. We probably don't have a lot of homeless listeners. We probably don't have a lot of full-on what you would call heroin addicts that listen to this podcast, but my guess is we do have several functioning addicts that are listening. Maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's addiction to prescription drugs, maybe it's pornography, whatever it is. I just love your authenticity. Both of you is just incredible. So I would love for you just to take 1 minute to give a word to these people listening who desperately need to know what they can do.
I'd say that the hope is in Christ. That's the bottom line, because the world is going to tell you everything. When you're going to start trying to fix yourself like I did. You're going to start trying to figure out something that can fill you up, something that can change you, something that can fix you. And it's only Christ. Just skip all the stuff and just seek God in it. Seek God. If you may think you're headed towards a problem, or you think that maybe this could get, it's only going to progressively get worse. And Jesus is the answer. Jesus is the fix. And you don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to know the next step, but you just need to seek him. Ask him to shine the light into the darkness that is your addiction.
I think in the context of what you said, Charles, I think the devil absolutely lies to us, wants to keep us in this place of darkness and hopelessness, doesn't want us to talk about it. Go to a loved one, go to your accountability, go to the people that love you, and start to talk about it. And help and let them help you walk through this thing, because the devil wants you to feel like you're alone. And you're not.
That's great.
Do you want to ask him our final question, Adam, that we ask everybody?
Yeah, we can do that. So we always end our times together asking a question. If there's anything in your heart and your mind that you really feel like you were made for, that you haven't done yet, and it doesn't have to be super spiritual. It doesn't have to be. It can be, but it can be. Hey, I really want to be great at windsurfing. That's really. I mean, I don't want to be great at windsurfing, but nevertheless, is there anything that you feel like it's in your heart, in your mind, that you would love to do, that you were made for?
That I was made for.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound cheesy, but we're doing it. Like, I was made for
I had a feeling that'd be your answer. Yeah.
I mean, like I really truly, it's funny because we were talking the other day and we're like, we got to get healthy. Like, we're finally walking in what God's called us to do in life. And we can't, we got to get healthy. We got to eat right. We've got things to do because God has truly called us to do what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a couple things. I'm gonna throw this out there. Something.
Don't say windsurfing.
No.
You know, Fred, just looking at you, you don't strike me as a windsurfer.
Yeah, no. I would. One thing that I would love to do that's in my heart is to go to Jerusalem.
Well, we're going January 8th through the 18th.
Wow.
But if you go, you need to preach one day with me.
I would love it. Love it.
That would be amazing.
Do you know what? If we get enough people signed up, we'll take you to Jerusalem. How about that?
Awesome.
Wow.
That'd be amazing.
You know, one thing I'm in hearing you guys' story, and I just feel like I'm supposed to say this because we have a lot of different listeners that listen to this. We have some church leaders that listen to this. We have some people that go to all types of churches listen to this. What impressed me about your story was it was simply people showing up in your life. Wasn't fancy, wasn't a mega church. And so many times, like you used to be jealous of the church down the street, and now everybody's jealous of the church that they see on social media or TV.
Right.
It's simply people being willing to invest in other people.
Yeah.
It's not sexy. It's not streamed.
And it's not complicated.
It's not complicated.
It's just simple.
And maybe we have people that go to a small country church, they go to a big mega church. The recipe is the same. Allow God to use you to speak into the lives of people.
Just one person.
Yeah.
Look at the impact one person has made in their life, and now they're impacting hundreds. And by the way, I want to go ahead and say this too, Fred. I want to come over there with our band on a Sunday night to the Lighthouse and do a worship service with you guys.
Yes. Yes.
Love it. It'd be amazing.
We're in.
I love it.
We'll work out a date. But in the meantime, we love y'all. Thank you for all you do.
We
We love
you
y'all.
too.
Thank y'all.
Thank you guys so much.
We'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Amazing.